A people without the knowledge of their past history, origin, and culture is like a tree without roots. The beauty of the world lies in the diversity of its people. Yes, it's all about culture, which is culture opens the sense of beauty. Before we proceed, allow me to introduce myself. My name is Joshua Biri Poriol, and this day we will be talking about what is culture. So, what is culture? According to Thomas Wolfe, culture is the arts elevated to set of beliefs, and it is stated that culture can be defined as all the ways of life, including the arts, the belief, and institution of a population that are passed down from generation to generation. Culture has been called the way of life for an entire society. As such, it includes codes of manners, dress, language, religions, rituals, and arts. For you to know, cultural differences should not separate us from each other, but rather, cultural diversity brings a collective strength that can benefit all the humanity. In addition, culture is the name for what people are interested in, their thoughts, their models, the books they read, or the speeches they hear. Culture is very important towards the society as it creates a sense of security and safety for individuals as it gives them a united and unified sense of belonging. For the majority of people, culture gives them the same feeling and emotional response as they have towards their family. As a student that respect other cultures, this shape our identity and influences our behaviors. And cultural diversity make us accept and even to some extent integrate and assimilate with other culture. For example, we Filipino, we have the culture of we used to practice mano po as a sign of respect to our eldest. So, cultural diversity has become very important in today's world. Last thing, we may have different religions, different languages, different colored skin, but we all belong to human race. That's all, fellas. Again, this is Joshua Biri Poriol. Embrace and share our culture. God bless and thank you, everyone.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Sergio Shalamiti. So now let's continue the discussion. So as Mr. Emporio discussed what is culture, now let's continue the two categories of culture, which is material and non-material culture. So now I will be discussing the material culture. So now what exactly is material culture? When we say culture again, it is the integrated human knowledge, behaviors, and beliefs. So when we say material culture, it is the physical representation of those things. So when we say from the word material, it is referring to an object. So for example, let's say we have a museum, right? So in the museum, we have many objects that represent different culture, and those things or those objects has many different functions and meaning. For example, mga object, paano nagiging part yun ng culture natin? Or paano nakaka-apekto yun sa culture natin? Yung mga bagay-bagay niyan. So, katulad ng kasuotan, di ba yung mga damit natin or like sa mga katutubo natin, sa culture natin, diba? Meron tayong iba't ibang design, colors, and for example, the music. Yung music na yun, nag-represent din yun ng iba't ibang meaning. And with the help of the musical instruments in yung object natin, yun yung nakakatulong upang ma-represent natin yung isang culture, isang specific group, kung ano ba talaga yung culture nila, or kung ano ba yung specific way of living nila. And also, for example, sa Taekwondo, ang object na nag-represent sa kanilang level is yung kanilang belt, diba? Diba may iba't ibang colors yun? So, it represents kung ano ba talaga yung level ng expertise nila. Kung saan ka na ba, beginner, or you are for competition na gano'n. So, meron din tayong crown. Pag crown naman, yun yung yung object na yun, it represents hierarchy, di ba? Parang ikaw yung nakakataas, you are king, you are queen, di ba? Kunyari sa United Kingdom na, di ba? Meron tayong king and queen on. So, yun yung nag-represent ng social status nila. Kasi yung object, it became a medium that which made people being identified, or it symbolizes them, especially on their social status or their social objectives. So, yung mga ganun, yun yung nag-represent sa kanila. Kaya yung object, it also, or material, it also represents the power, their power. So, yun lang yung tungkol sa object. So, meaning to say, pag sinabi natin material culture, nag-represent pa siya sa mga bagay na nag-represent sa isang specific group or culture or society. So, that's also, ang mga material cultures is represented by the next report. So, that's all for my, thank you.
Thank you, Miss Ryu. So, before I start my discussion, let me introduce myself. I am Jinjin P. Cosella. So, today, I'll be discussing the non-material culture. Ano nga ba ang non-material cultures? Ang non-material cultures refers to the non-physical ideas that people have about their cultures, including beliefs, values, rules, norms, morals, language, organization, and institution. For instance, the non-material cultures concept of religion consists of beliefs or a set of ideas about God, worship, norms, and ethics. These beliefs determine how the culture responds to each religious topics. Several processes that a culture uses to shape its members' thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. Diba? Mas deep na itong non-material cultures. Kung baga, hindi natin siya nakikita talaga. Diba? Instead, nasa utak natin siya or nasa sarili natin siya mismo. Just like yung mga beliefs, yung values na alam natin, and then yung languages na ipinamana sa atin ng ating bawat generation, which is an example of non-material cultures. Examples of non-material cultures include languages and words, dress codes, etiquette, rituals, business and social transactions, religions, laws, punishment, and values. Non-material cultures does not include any physical object or artifacts. One of the examples of non-material culture is ang bayanihan. According to Fernando Amorsolo's, bayanihan painting symbolized one of the good traits of the Filipino people, which is being helpful. Although bayanihan can manifest itself in many forms, it is probably most clearly and impressively displayed in the old tradition of neighbors helping a relocating family by getting enough volunteers to carry the whole house and literally moving it to its new location. In present time, bayanihan is referred to as the unity of Filipinos in order to address and resolve the issues and concerns of the society. That's all for my report.
One of the various ways of cultural change are enculturation. So, enculturation is a process of learning from infancy or birth the components of life in one's culture. So, when we say enculturation, it's simply put on how we attain our cultural values and understand the norms of our culture. It is an important process because if we want to be a successful member of society, we need to understand cultural ethics. Way back when we were a child, as soon as we born, we begin to acquire culture around us, with or without influence, because we live in a country which we can easily adapt many things. We first enculturated at home through the influence of our parents and people around us. So as we grow, the enculturation process involves other individuals, includes friends, teachers, people living in society. We learn about the culture we live in. Through enculturation, we learn that behavior, values, language, morals are acceptable in our society. We learn by observing other members of our society, including our parents, friends, teachers, because enculturation provides a means for us to become functional member of our society.
I am Angel Ida versus Cyrus. I am the next reporter, and my topic is all about enculturation. So, what is enculturation? Enculturation refers to the mythological process in which the gospel is rooted in a particular culture and the latter is transformed by its introduction to Christianity. It is according to Omerin View in 1992. So para sa ako, an enculturation is influence of culture sila to religion. It means na an enculturation na refers sa process by which a particular church expresses its faith and life in and through the culture. So from this expression, it includes mutual enrichment. On the one hand, culture receives a new dimension, and on the other hand, fresh ways of understanding and living the Christian faith are opened up. Next is, according to Pope John Paul II, enculturation is the intimate transformation of authentic cultural values through their integration in Christianity and the insertion of Christianity in the various human cultures. So this means that an enculturation is characterized by a dual movement, a dialogical movement towards cultures via the incarnation of the gospel and the transmission of its values, and movement towards the church that involves the incorporation of values that come from the cultures the latter encounters. So therefore, a fruitful cross-fertilization can follow. And then, in other words, enculturation raises two related problems. It is the evangelization of cultures and the cultural understanding of the gospel. Next is, this movement that led Pope John Paul II in 1982 said that the sentences between culture and faith is not only a requirement of culture but also faith. Faith that does not become culture is not fully accepted nor entirely reflected upon or faithfully experienced. So this means that enculturation is not an action but a process that unfolds over time, one that is active and based on mutual recognition and dialogue, a critical mind and insight, faithfulness and conversion, transformation and growth, renewal and innovation. So, enculturation is a two-way process, and that is the evangelization of cultures and the cultural understanding of the gospel, or in other words, it roots the gospel in a culture and introduces that transformed culture to Christianity. So, for example, to root the gospel in the African culture is to initiate two events. The first event is to transform the African culture of oppressing women into a culture where men and women are treated as human persons equal in dignity, rights, and privilege. The second event is to develop the African culture's latent potential towards the human development of the woman, created like her male counterpart in the image and likeness of God. So the other aspect is to introduce the woman and her transformed culture to Christianity. So for example, by allowing the woman a meaningful place among the agents of enculturation. So An enculturation, in short, it is a dynamic relation between the Christian message and diverse cultures, an insertion of the Christian life into a culture, an ongoing process of reciprocal and critical interpretation and assimilation between them. So, if we really want to understand what is at stake in the process called enculturation, we must first clarify the relationship between faith and culture and see how the Christian faith spreads around the world when it comes into contact with all cultures. So if we really want to understand enculturation, we must first ask ourselves what culture means. So to conclude, as John Paul II says, the goal of enculturation is to bring the power of the gospel to the very heart of the culture and make faith a living expression. That's all. I hope you understand and thank you.
So next is acculturation. Acculturation is another big term. It is the cultural modification of an individual, group, or people by adapting to or borrowing traits from another culture. So ang acculturation is all about the culture that adapted to another place. So ang acculturation happens to many people, and there is nothing wrong with that. It's always good to adapt to a new cultures once you have moved into it, just as long as you do not forget your own culture. And the wonderful things about it, for example, in the Philippines, is the way that earlier Chinese migrants and their descendants have adapted some of our cultures. I have heard that the Chinese don't really wear black clothing during funerals, but now they do. They said it's something they adapt from the Filipinos, since it does represents more how family member feels with mourning for a loved one. Some of them actually like Filipino dishes. The example is sinigang. Is also explained as the merging of cultures as a result of prologue contract. Immigrants to the United States of America become acculturated to American life. Refugees and indigenous people likewise adapt to the culture of the dominant majority. So mauni ang resulta tungod sa kadugay is na-adapt na ang culture sa isa ka lugar. So mao na ang giingon diha na immigrants to the United States of America acculturated to American life. Kabantay ka mo ka ng mga citizen na Filipino sa Amerika. Dili na sila mga citizens kung dili sila nagdugay ng pila ka years. So based on my research is 5 years daw before mga citizen sa Amerika.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Janelle K.R. Habay, and I'm going to discuss the continuation of our report, which is all about cultural relativism. So first, before we tackle or discuss what cultural relativism is, we must know first what is relativism. So what is relativism? When we say relativism, it is the theory that holds that morality is relative to the norms of one's culture. That is, whether an action is right or wrong depends on the moral norms of the society in which it is practiced. The same action may be morally right in one society, but morally wrong in another. So it means ang relativism kaya it would say what is true for you is true for you, and what is true for me is true for me. Like for example, if para sa imo ang isa ka butang kay sakto na siya or true, then para sa imo sakto na or true. At kung para sa aho kay mali ang kana nga butang, din para sa aho mali na nga butang. Analogously, cultural relativism would say what you believe, practice, or value depends on your culture, while what I believe, practice, or value depends on my culture. In other words, cultural relativism, the idea that a person believes, values, and practice should be understood based on that person's own culture rather than be judged against the criteria of another. So it is clearly stated nga ang cultural relativism kung unsa gajud ang tinuuhan sa kana nga society, mao na gajud na ang ilang tinuuhan. Kung unsa pud ang tinuuhan sa uban nga society, mao na jud to ang ilahang tinuuhan. So one of the best example of cultural relativism kay ang kanaang food choice. Like for example ang sa mga Muslim gani or sa kanaganing nagasimba sa Seventh-day Adventist or kanang mga Sabadista, dili sila mukaon og kanaang baboy kay bawal sa ilaha og naa sila'y gituuhan kibali. So it's their choice nga dili sila mukaon ato kay mao man ang naa sa ilang culture, mao man ilang gisunod, mao ilang beliefs. So kung unsa ang ilahang culture, ilang gisunod. Tapos kung unsa sad ang atong gituuhan, kita kay mukaon man ta sa kanang baboy, then mo na ang ato ang gisundan or mo na ang atong beliefs na atong gituuhan. So that's the end of my topic about cultural relativism. Thank you.
Good day, everyone. I am Edwin M. Duhenes Jr. Our topic to discuss is cultural relativism versus cultural perspective. Now, I will discuss the cultural perspectives. First, what comes to your mind when we talk about cultural perspective? Cultural perspective refers to the way that individuals are shaped by their environment as well as social and cultural factors. Such factors includes person's nationality, race, and gender. You try to appreciate the design of the house, considering its various perspectives, but you never judge the design based on only one perspective. Having perspective of one culture is a viewing a situation or concept through the eyes of an individual's native and environmental and social influence. Moving from a cultural perspective to cultural relativism is the erosion of reasons that it causes. Rather than simply saying, we need to understand the morals of other cultures. It says, we cannot judge the morals to other cultures, regardless of the reason for their actions. There is no longer any perspective, and it becomes literally impossible to argue that anything a culture does is right or wrong. If we hold on to strict cultural relativism, it is not possible to say that human sacrifice is wrong or that respect for the elderly is right. After all, these are product of the culture. That would be all, and thank you for listening.
To avoid judging the cultural practices of groups that are different to yours, we can use the cultural relativism approach. Cultural relativism refers to not judging a culture to our own standards of what is right or wrong, strange or normal. Instead, we should try to understand cultural practices of other groups in its own cultural context. When we say cultural relativism, it means that we need to relate our culture to other culture. For example, instead of thinking fried crickets are disgusting, one should instead ask, why do some cultures eat fried insect? You may learn that fried cricket or grasshopper are full of protein and in Mexico. It is a famous Oaxaca regional cuisine and have been eaten for thousands of years as a healthy food source. The contradiction of cultural relativism becomes immediately apparent. A society that embraces the notion that there is no ultimate right or wrong loses the ability to make any judgments at all. The way in which relativism, including cultural relativism, has permeated modern society is demonstrated in the bizarre ways in which we try to deal with this contradiction. Relativism in general breakdowns when examined from a purely logical perspective. The basic premise is that truth is relative. If every truth statement is valid, then the statement some truths are absolute must be valid. The statement there are no absolutely truths is accurate according to relativism, but it is an absolute truth itself. This contradicts the very concept of relativism, meaning that absolute relativism is self-contradictory and impossible. In general, cultural relativism is better to be used when it comes to interaction than cultural perspective because it actually focuses on respect, on valuing other culture, on seeing the culture in their own context, not seeing the culture by your own standard. Always remember, when we are speaking of cultural perspective, it actually judging one culture using your own standard. But when we speaking cultural relativism, it's actually judging culture with their own standard.
Good day everyone, I am Jeran Scolansi and the topic I will tackle today is the strength of the Filipino character. But before we proceed to that, let us move first to the overview of this topic. A moral recovery program, Building a People, Building a Nation. It was submitted on April 27, 1988 by the task force to President Corazon Aquino, the Senate, and the members of the press by then Senator Leticia Shahani, the moving spirit behind the program. It talks about the strengths and weaknesses of the Filipino character. It aims to strengthen Filipino positive traits and change the negative ones. As to what we can observe, the Filipino nation at present is on the verge of a crisis. We can say we Filipinos generally have a considerable number of strengths, but these strong points are also the root of our weaknesses. Filipinos are generally happy and are full of humor. In fact, we are regarded as one of the happiest people in the world. We laugh at our problems, we laugh at our mistakes, and we laugh at our undertakings. Even in the hardest of times, we still do not fail to wear a smile. It can be a negative trait at times, but in general, it is our advantage towards other culture. So the first is the pakikipagkapwa-tao. Pakikipagkapwa-tao or regard for others. Filipinos are open to others and feel one with others. We regard others with dignity and respect and deal with them as fellow human beings. Pakikipagkapwa-tao is manifested in a basic sense of justice and fairness. And in concern for others, it is demonstrated in the Filipinos' ability to empathize with others. In helpfulness and generosity in times of need or pakikiramay, in the practice of bayanihan or mutual assistance, and in the famous Filipino hospitality. Filipinos possess a sensitivity to people's feelings or pakiramdam, pagtitiwala or trust, and the sense of gratitude or utang na loob. Because of pakikipagkapwa-tao, Filipinos are very sensitive to the quality of interpersonal relationships and are very dependent on them. If our relationships are very satisfactory, we are happy and secure. Pakikipagkapwa-tao results in camaraderie and the feeling of closeness to one another. It helps promote unity as well, a sense of social justice. The second one is the family orientation. Filipinos possess a genuine and deep love for the family, which includes not simply the spouses and children, parents and siblings, but also grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, godparents, and other ceremonial relatives. To the Filipino, one's family is the source of personal identity, the source of emotional and material support, and the person's main commitment and responsibility. Concern for family is manifested in the honor and respect given to parents and elders, in the care given to children, the generosity towards kin in need, and in the great sacrifices one endures for the welfare of the family. This sense of family results in a feeling of belonging or rootedness, in a basic sense of security. The third one is the flexibility adaptability, and creativity. Filipinos have a great capacity to adjust and to adapt to circumstances and to the surrounding environment, both physical and social. Unplanned or unanticipated events are never overly disturbing or disorienting as the flexible Filipino adjusts to whatever happens. We possess a tolerance for ambiguity that enables us to remain unfazed by uncertainty or lack of information. We are creative, resourceful, adept at learning, and able to improvise and make use of whatever is at hand in order to create and produce. This quality of the Filipino is manifested in the ability to adapt to life in any part of the world, in the ability to make new things out of scrap, and to keep old machines running, and of course, in the creative talent manifested in the cultural sphere. It is seen likewise in the ability to accept change. The result is productivity, innovation, entrepreneurship, equanimity, and survival. The next one is hard work and industry. Filipinos have the capacity for hard work, given proper conditions, the desire to raise one's standard of living, and to possess the essentials of a decent life for one's family. Combined with the right opportunities and incentives, stimulate the Filipino to work very hard. This is manifested most noticeably in a willingness to take risks with jobs abroad and to work there at 2 or 3 jobs. The result is productivity and entrepreneurship for some, and survival despite poverty for others. Let's now move on to the next one, which is the joy and humor. Filipinos have a cheerful and fun-loving approach to life and its ups and downs. There is a pleasant disposition, a sense of humor, and a propensity for happiness that contribute not only to the Filipino charm, but to the indomitability of the Filipino spirit. Laughing at ourselves and our trouble is an important coping mechanism, often playful, sometimes cynical, sometimes disrespectful. We laugh at those we love and at those we hate, and make jokes about our fortune, good and bad. This sense of joy and humor is manifested in the Filipino love for social and celebrations, in our capacity to laugh even in the most trying of times, and in the appeal of political satire. The result is a certain emotional balance and optimism, a healthy disrespect for power and office, and the capacity to survive. The next one is faith and religiosity. Filipinos have a deep faith in God. Innate religiosity enables us to comprehend and genuinely accept reality in the context of God's will and plan. God's tragedy and bad fortune are accepted, and some optimism characterizes even the poorest lives. Filipinos live very intimately with religion. This is tangible, a part of everyday life. We ascribe human traits to a supernatural God whom we alternately threaten and thank, call upon for mercy or forgiveness, and the peace by pledges. Prayer is an important part of our lives. The faith of the Filipino is related to Bahala Na, which is, instead of being viewed as defeatist in resignation, may be considered positively as a reservoir of psychic energy, an important psychological support on which we can lean during difficult times. This pampalakas ng loob allows us to act despite uncertainty. The results of the Filipinos' faith are courage, daring, optimism, inner peace, as well as the capacity to genuinely accept tragedy and death. The next one is the ability to survive. Filipinos have an ability to survive which is manifested in our capacity for endurance despite difficult times, and in our ability to get by on so little. Filipinos make do with what is available in the environment, even by eking out a living from a garbage dump. This survival instinct is related to the Filipinos who bravely carry on through the harshest economic and social circumstances. Regretfully, one wonders what we might be able to do under better circumstances. So that's all from my report. Thank you for listening.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Roslyn de los Reyes, and now I discuss you the weaknesses of the Filipino characters. So first is the extreme family-centeredness. It has excessive concern for family means using one's office and power to promote family interest, and thus factionalism, patronage, political dynasties, and the protection of erring family members. It results in a lack of concern for the common goods and act as a lack of national consciousness. So, extreme family-centeredness, it is a labis na pagmamalasakit sa pamilya na nangangahulugan ng paggagamit ng tungkulin at kapangyarihan ng isang tao para maitaguyod ang mga interest ng pamilya, and thus factionalism, patronage, political dynasties, and protection ng mga nagkakamali ng miyembro sa pamilya. Nagreresulta ito sa kawalan ng pagmamalasakit sa kabutihang panlahat at nagsisilbing hadlang sa pangbansang kamalayan. Filipino is a very strong family protection, whether in a good or bad condition and situation, or it is consented or overprotected. So, why Filipino extremely family-centered? So, Filipino are known for having strong and close families that place high regard and put importance of their family before anything else. So, ang Filipino is family first before anything else. So they work all day and do all they can do to feed and provide for their family. So bahato nila ang tanan to feed and to provide for their family. Next is extreme personalism. Take things personally. Cannot separate objectives test from emotional involvement. Because of this, the Filipino is uncomfortable with bureaucracy, rules and regulations, and with standard procedures. He uses personal contacts and give preference to family and friends in hiring services and even voting. So extremely personalisms lead to graft and corruptions evident in Philippine society. So extreme personalism. Take things personal, hindi maaaring paghihiwalayin ang mga layunin na gawain mula sa emosyonal na paglahok. So, because of this, the Filipino is uncomfortable o dili sila komportable sa mga rules and regulations na o mga pamalaod o sa karaniwang pamaagi. So, he used personal contacts. So, ilang gigamit ang mga personal contacts at nagbibigay kagustuhan sa pamilya and friends and hiring services at kahit sa pagboto. Ilang gigamit ang mga personal contacts para mahatag nila ang mga kagustuhan sa ilang pamilya and friends and hiring services o kahit nasa pagboto. So, extreme personalism leads to graft and corruptions evident in Philippine society. So, ang sobrang personalismo ay humahantong sa graft and corruption na makikita sa lipunang Pilipino. Filipino views the world in terms of personal relationship and extent to which one is able personally to relate to things and people determine our recognition of their existence and their value. So this personalism is manifested and the tendency to give personal interpretation to action to take things personally. Personalism is also manifested and the need to establish personal relationship before any business or work relationship can be successful. Next is lack of discipline. A questionable attitude toward time and space manifested and lack of precision and fulfillment for the management result in lack of standardization and quality control. So, impatient result in shortcuts, palusot, ninjas, kogon, lack of discipline often result in efficient work system, the violation of rules and casual work ethics, lacking value. So, ang kakulangan sa disiplina, kasagaran gayud siya mo resulta sa dili maayo na mga sistema sa trabaho. So, lack of discipline, it is meant that you do think they can hurt someone without regard for other feelings. You need to discipline yourself to be more aware of others' feeling and need, so as not to hurt them either emotionally or physically. Self-control may be lacking. So, both pasabot any, you do think na makasakit sa uban tao without wala imo pag-alam sa ila feeling. So, kinahanglan nimo disiplinahon ang imong kaugalingon aron mas ma-aware ka sa uban na mga pagbati o feeling o needs para dili sila masakitan emotionally and physically. Next is passive and lack of initiative. Waiting to be told what to do, reliance on other complacency, lack of a sense of urgency. There is a high tolerance for efficiency, for services, and even violation of one's basic rights. Too patient and matiisin. Too is resigned for this fate. The Filipino is easily oppressed and exploited. So, ang Pilipino magpaabot ra na pagsabihan kung unsay dapat niyang gawin. So, reliance in other complacency, kulang of a sense of urgency, na ay mataas na pagpaubaya sa kawalan ng kakayahan at mahinang serbisyo and even violations of one basic rights. Arang ra ka patient o matiisin ang Pilipino o dali ra masuk. Filipinos are generally passive and lacking in initiative. One waits to be told what has to be done. There is a strong reliance on other, example leaders and government, to do things for us. This is related to one attitude towards authority. Filipino have a need for a strong authority figure and feel safer and more secure in the presence of such as authority. One is generally submissive for those in authority and is likely to raise issues and or questions decisions. Filipino tends to be more complacent and there is a rarely a sense of urgency about any problem. There is a high tolerance for inefficiency, poor services, and ever violations of one basic right. In many ways, it can be said that the Filipino is too patient and long-suffering or matiasan, too easily resigned to one's fate.
5. Colonial mentality. When we say colonial mentality ay ang pag-uugali ng mga Pilipino kung saan mas ninanais nilang magkaroon ng kultura na mayroon sa ibang bansa dahil ang colonial mentality nababago ang mentalidad ng isang bansa ukol sa tradisyonal at original na kultura nito. Ang isang halimbawa ng colonial mentality ay ang pagtangkilik sa mga produkto ng ibang bansa o ang tinatawag ng mga imported products. 6. Kanya-kanyang syndrome, talangka mentality. Ang kanya-kanyang syndrome ay nagresulta sa paghina ng espiritu ng kooperatiba at pamayanan at sa pagkait sa mga karapatan ng iba. 7. Lack of self-analysis and self-reflection. When we see lack of self-analysis and self-reflection, in the face of serious problem, both personal and social, there is lack of analysis or self-reflection. Bisan pa daw ma-personal, ma-social media, na daw gihapon ang lack of analysis o self-reflection. 8. Emphasizes on form rather than substance. When we say emphasize, have a civilian and culture, opportunity has increasingly paid one of the form over substance. To obtain image and character count more than truth, humanity is so abstractive in their isolated competition of personal interest and enjoyment that other people have rarely served as tools for achieving it. Truth and integrity end up sizing behind the set to win.
Good day, ma'am. My topic is impact of culture of morality. Speaking of the significant impact of culture on the morality of people, let us think of the Japanese frame culture, guilt culture, empress, punishment, and the forgiveness as way of restoring the moral order. Shame culture, stress, self-denial,
and humanity as way of restoring the social order. What keeps the Japanese from acting contrarily to moral standards in the fear of being put to shame? For example, as romance or behavior are guided in the part by a set of social norms about morality that forms a basic and important parts of our culture. Morality refers to a system of belief about what is right or good compared to what is wrong or bad. Morals vary romantically across time, place, and across culture. There is a great deal of cultural variation in morality, and social norms related to a wide variety of behaviors. Some cultures approve of polygamy. That's all, ma'am. Thank you.
Good morning, ma'am. Good morning, classmates. My name is Sheila Joy Aplejeda, and I continue the report of impact of culture on morality. They would do when put to shame harakiri suicide. So, harakiri suicide is a ritual suicide by disembowelment with a sword, formerly practiced in Japan by samurai as a honorable alternative to disgrace or execution. Why is it called harakiri? Harakiri means stomach cutting in Japanese, where the word hara refers to stomach and kiri refers to cutting. And why people do harakiri? Ito ay sinadya bilang pagbabayad kasalanan. Nagpapakita din ito ng napakalaking psikolohikal na katapangan. Contrast this the guilt culture in the Philippines. So, when a Filipino commits an immoral act, he would of course feel guilty. But after confessing his sin, he may feel as if he is back to normal things and can sin again. So, dito sa Pilipinas is nakasanayan na nating kultura yung kapag nagkaroon tayo ng kasalanan sa isang tao, magigilty tayo, di ba? Tapos, pagkakalaunan na gagawin ulit natin. Di ba? Like for example, di ba? Cheating, di ba? Nag-cheat ka, nagilty ka, pinatawad ka, pero ginawa mo ulit. So, yun. Let's proceed. This is in need of moral development. The moral development occurs as we grow and helps us choose between right and wrong. So, Filipino homes and schools have to do something to teach the moral development they want or hope to see. So, di ba sa bahay pa lamang, tinuturo na dapat sa mga, lalo na sa mga bata, yung paggalang sa magulang, pagmano, di ba, yung ganun. Pagpo at opo, di ba? Tapos kapag naman nakakagawa sila ng kasalanan, nagmumura sila or nakakapagsinungaling, bibigyan na natin sila agad ng punishment para hindi nila makasanayan paglaki nila. Lalo na, di ba, sa school, di ba? Tinuturo din yung moral development para naman maayos ang pakikipagkomunikasyon natin sa mga guro, sa mga classmates natin, and etc. And that's all, ma'am, classmates. Thank you.